Hello and welcome to this video. Here what we are going to do is we are going to create a Alpine select component where you could filter through all the options which are present in the select box. So here I've got this select button, and if I click on it there are lots of options, and that makes it very difficult for user to select one option. So I'm going to convert it into a select to drop down. This video is actually inspired by this code pen which was written by Ryan, and if we click over here we see that we can see all the option, and if I type into it, only those options which match the search gets displayed. So we are going to be building something very similar. We are going to be building from scratch, so you do not need to worry about the code that is written over here, and we are going to make this larval component so that we can reuse it anywhere. So let us start working on it. First of all, I'm going to keep this over here, and I'm going to create another form field with a similar value, and I'm going to call it as another user, and I've given it I'm validating it on the backend, and I think I'm validating using this name, another user ID. So I'm going to pass it over here, and instead of using this X select, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use X Alpine select. So these are the options that I would be passing, similar to as I passed select. This is just a class. And so let us create this component, Alpine select. So this would go into resources view components, and within that I would create a file, alpine-select.play.php. All right, so this is going to accept props. First of all, we have the field and options that we are passing, so that will go into the top, and then we will have a div, and I'm going to use the attributes merge functionality that comes with the plate component, and I'm going to merge the classes. So each select component will have the class of margin top of 4 and flex 1. All right, then we are going to have the Alpine code, so that would be x data, and I'm going to define this as a method. I'm going to call it as data, and let's close this div, and at the end let's create a script tag, and within this script tag I'm going to define this method, this function data, this one, this should match, and this would return all the properties and methods which would be used by our select component. So first of all, first property is going to be search. This is going to be the value that user is going to search, and then we will have a selected object which will have a label and value property. And let's define first of all a hidden field, and this hidden field will have a value of selected dot value, and the name of the field would be the field that we are passing via props. This way, when the form is submitted, this hidden field will have the value of the selected data that can be retrieved via form. And then we are going to create the input box. This input box would have a two-way binding using X model to the search, and then we are going to define a placeholder, a class of 1/2, and type of search. So let us see how it is looking. We reload it, we get the label, we get the input box, and nothing happens when I type into it. That's because that's not wired currently. So let us work on that one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to show it using xShow directive, and I'm going to link it to options visible. We would only display when option visible is true. So let us define this option visible property over here, and this would be initially set to false. And I will also define two methods to set the value of this property. I'm going to call it as hide option, which would set this to false, and the other one would be show options, which would set this property to true. All right, so now let's what we are going to do is, whenever user types on it, we want to display this div. However, we want to display this option, but this option is in collection. So first thing that we need to do is we need to change this collection to an array. So I'm going to define this property. I'm going to call it options, and we can write our PHP code within these variables. So I'm going to map through the option, and this within each map I'm going to return an array. I'm going to return the label, which would be the option itself, and then I'm going to return the value, which would be the key. And then I'm going to convert this, and I'm going to convert this collection to the array using all. In fact, I need to use values. There we go. Now this options is an array. So let us loop through this option within this X data. I'm going to use the template tag, and using X4 directive, I'm going to loop through option in options, and for each option what we want to display an anchor tag, and that anchor tag would have a text of option dot label. We can use X text directive. So let us see how this one looks like. This would be label, and when we click on this one, I'm going to set this to true. I'm going to show this div, and when we click away, I'm going to hide this div. Okay, now that's done. Let's test it. When I click on it, nothing happens. That's because I've misspelled it. All right, let's do it again. When I click on it, we get this div, which is all the options. So that is working. Now just let's work on the functionality part. Instead of looping through the options, I'm going to create another property, and I'm going to call it as filtered options, and this will only contain those options which the user is searching. So let us create this filter options method over here, and here we are going to loop through all the options. We are going to filter them this word, and this is a filter method. And here what we are going to do is we are going to convert the label to lowercase, and we are only going to return it if it is included in the search text that user is searching. We are also going to convert that to lowercase. All right, and here I'm going to give it a class of flex and some padding so that div looks a bit better. So when I reload it, click on it, we see that uh, when we type, only those options are coming which user has searched. So that is working fine. We are going to have this click method, and when we click on it, we are going to call this method selected, and I'm also going to pass the option. Let's define this method over here, selected. In fact, this selected and this selected is same, so I'm going to change this to selected option so as to not have any conflict. And here we are going to pass this option. And what I'm going to do, as soon as the user clicks on it, I'm going to set this selected value to the option that is being passed. I'm also going to hide this div. And I'm also going to set the search box equal to option dot label. Let us test this one out. When I click on it, and there we go, the value is reflected over here. If we want to further debug this, what we can do is we can create two span tags over here. This would have a x text of selected dot label, and another one will have a x text of selected dot value. This we can use to debug whether it is working fine or not. So now if we test it, and currently the label is empty and value is empty. When we click on it, there we go, we get the label as well as the value. So that is working fine, and this would go into the hidden property that we have defined. All right, now let us fix the design of this one so that we can make it a bit usable. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give I'm going to give this a class of, I'm going to give this a cursor pointer, and on the hover I want to change this to blue. So now if we test this one, there we go, that looks a bit better. And another thing is I'll also change the, I'll also provide some classes to this div. I'll give it a border, some padding, a width, and I'll change the background to gray, and that looks a lot better. I'm also going to give it a height, so that let's give it a height of 60, and I'm going to give an overflow y of scroll. There we go, that's better. And another thing is when we click on search, this submit button goes down. I want to avoid that. It should stay wherever it is. In order to do that, what we will have to do is we'll have to give it a absolute position, and I'm also going to give a z index of let's say 50. Let's test this out. Now when I click on it, the submit button stays wherever it is. However, this width has been increased. Now I'm not very good with the CSS, just manage my stuff, but I have been told that if we wrap this up div in a div and give it a relative position, this should be fixed. So let us try that one out. There we go. Now it is taking a width equal to the search box, and our functionality is also working fine. Now the next thing is when we submit it, we get this validation. However, when I select it and submit it again, we do not get the validation ever. However, our value is no longer preserved. So what I would like to do is I'm going to preserve this value. This is not very difficult. It's a very basic functionality. So in order to preserve this value, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass a selected value from here. Let's just pass 2 for the time being. Then we will make it dynamic later on. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an x in it. Before that we need to define it as a property, and default would be empty. And within the x in it, I'm going to call this method setInitial, and I'm going to pass it the value of selected using the PHP like this. Now let us create this method setInitial. What I want to do is whenever a value is being passed, I want to search whether that value exists in the options. So I'm going to find that in the option using the find method. Now we can find using the value. So if that option is found, if we have found this option, we can check if the selected option is not undefined, which means that we have found the value that was passed using the selected. Then I'm simply going to call this set select option method, and I'm going to pass the selected option. This should be select option instead of selected option. There we go. Let's test this. If I reload it, we get this value of 2, and if I change this value from 2 to, let's say, 4, and reload it, and there we go, that value is selected. So that is working fine. Let's make it a dynamic. In order to make it dynamic, we have this old helper in Laravel, and we can use this, and the default value is going to be empty. So now if we submit, now we see that the value is preserved. So that is working fine. And one thing that last thing that I want to do is when I click on this X button, we see that the value is gone from the input box, but it is still preserved in the hidden value. So I want to clear that one as well. So in order to clear that, I'm going to define this search. So whenever you click on that X button, this search um, is called, and we can, when the search is called, we're going to call a method. Let's call it clear search. And within this clear search, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the value of the selected label and value to false or empty. There we go. Let's test this one out, and I select a value. When I click on X, there it is, that's gone. So that is working fine as well. So I think that brings us to the end of this component. We started from scratch and we have built a lot of code. However, we have extracted everything into a component, and now we can use it anywhere that we want with just these 4 lines of code. We can repeat it and use it in multiple screens. That is the beauty of Blade components. Hope you have liked this video. Do let me know in the comments, and if you have any suggestions or questions, don't forget to post in the comments, and please do subscribe to the channel for future videos related to this topic. Thank you.